This is the I'm Possible Project show, where we interview real people who have achieved incredible feats in the face of overwhelming odds, showing that impossible is just a state of mind and that anything is possible. I'm your host, Joshua Rivedal. Today, in episode 25, No Shame on You, I talk to Miriam Ament. Let's jump right in.
Today we have Miriam Ament, and she is the founder and president of No Shame on You, a nonprofit organization dedicated to eliminating the stigma associated with mental health conditions and raising awareness in the Jewish community and beyond. Really, really great work, folks. And the goal is for the people who need help to seek it, for family members and friends to know how to provide proper support and to save lives. Miriam earned her BA in American History from Barnard College and a master's in organizational psychology from Teachers College, Columbia University. She is an Ivy League grad, folks. Fancy. She lives in Chicago with her husband, musician David Foreman. Miriam, I am so glad to have you here on the call today, on this interview. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
And we've gotten to know each other very briefly. We met through our mutual friend, Ephraim Epstein, who is a bit of a connector and a mover and a shaker in the field of mental health. And for our listeners, I want them to know that you are way more than that 50 to 75 word bio that I just read off. We got a chance to talk for a few minutes. So would you grace us with a little bit more about Miriam Ament, a little bit of the background on your life, anything and everything, whatever you feel comfortable sharing. Tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Sure. So, and a big thank you. You mentioned Ephraim. I just want to say a big thank you because he is quite the connector and has connected me to so many amazing people in the mental health world. So I just want a big thank you to Ephraim for being so amazing. But a little bit about me. I grew up in Chicago and went to college in New York, as you mentioned, and ended up staying in New York after college and eventually going to graduate school there. And in my years in New York, I was living with depression, and I ended up becoming kind of more and more depressed as the years went on, and sort of more and more friends were getting married or partnering up and that kind of stuff, and just feeling more and more alone. And I ended up eventually being hospitalized a few times for depression. And in between a few of the hospitalizations, I moved to LA for a year, actually, and lived there and worked in entertainment, which was really cool. Worked in casting for some films, but ultimately ended up coming back to Chicago because I was still living with depression, even though I moved. It kind of stays with you, and I really needed to just get better and be surrounded by friends and family and kind of get myself better, which thank God I did. And now I'm in a very different place. But that's a little bit about my history.
Super. I think in certain senses we're living very similar lives, but the hodgepodge of what's happened in your life is a little different than mine. But I remember being at home and, having to go back and stay with my mom for a little bit after about 6.5 years ago after being suicidal and a really bad episode with depression. So what was that like for you? A, having to go back home, and B, then having to be hospitalized. That's serious business, and it could be deflating, it could be restful, it could be a lot of things. And I'm curious about what your experience with that was.
Right. So it was really tough. During my second hospitalization, when I was still in New York, one of my closest friends, who I had been friends with since we were 5 years old, called me when I was in the hospital and said, "I only want to talk to you when you're happy, so let's not talk again for a while." And then I never heard from her again. And that was really devastating. I ended up extending my hospital stay and really informed how I led the next many years of my life in terms of my hospitalizations and not telling people and just having this secret that I wanted no one to know about because I was so nervous that anyone would find out. And especially after what I thought was a close friend, how she treated me, I was so afraid to have anyone know. So I kind of lived my life in fear and moved to LA thinking I would start fresh. But actually, as I mentioned, it stays with you, the depression, until you're in a better place. So coming home was tough. I mean, I ended up hospitalized again back in Chicago, and I was 32 living with my parents, which is not terrible, but it was just not, most of my friends were in a very, very different place, and my family members and everyone I knew was in a different place in life, so it was not how I envisioned things going. But thankfully, I reached a point where I said, I want to get better, and I'm not going to get better if I'm, sitting around not trying to get better. So I took my recovery very seriously. I found the right therapist. I started taking my medication very seriously and was very strict about, taking it at the same time every night and all that kind of stuff, and really ended up taking it seriously and thankfully ended up, back in a job, moved out of my parents' house once I started working for a few months and could move back out and get my own place. And then, from there, stayed working at this great law firm for about 11 years, and it really gave me the confidence and tools and skills to do a lot. And ultimately, when I was ready, to start No Shame on You. So ultimately, things worked out well, but it was a hard road to get there.
Sure. I mean, coming from, I don't want to say rock bottom, but from a very deep, dark place, it's a long road up. First of all, I think I want to, on behalf of our listeners and on behalf of myself, I just want to applaud you for just being so courageous and working on yourself and doing you and being, I hate to lather it on too thick, but being a beacon and speaking because that friend of yours, I mean, right now I can say good riddance, but then if I was going through that, I would have been devastated too. For you to overcome that, because relationships are everything in life. So rebounding from that is courageous in and of itself. How difficult has it been to maintain that routine, that regimen of staying on top of your mental health, the med every night, and maybe some exercise or whatever it is you do for your coping skills? What does that look like?
Well, no, that's a good question. It's definitely a priority for me. So it's sort of my biggest priority, and really it's all, when you mention routine, it's really all part of one big thing. I mean, I've learned, there's so many articles now about what you eat really affects your mental health, and exercising is really good for your mental health, and getting outdoors is important for mental health. And there are so many things that are so important for maintaining your mental health. So it's really something that I'm constantly thinking about and constantly monitoring. And if I'm feeling like I'm having a tough day or super anxious or anything like that, I will, reach out. I'm lucky to have a therapist who says, text me, if you're, I try to be very careful not to text her too much, but, every month or 2 months or whatever it is, if I'm having, a rough day and it's not our day to see each other, I'll reach out to her, because she always she ends every session with, feel free to reach out to me if you need to. So I try to be respectful of her time, but at the same time know that that's an option. And also now there are so many tools in general. There are online active listeners. There are therapists online. There's telepsychiatry. There's so much out there now that thankfully there are ways for anyone to maintain their mental health routine, at any point during the day or at night. If you're feeling alone or like you need to reach out to someone, there's so much out there, which I'm so grateful to be able to share with your listeners. And I try to share on the Shame on You platforms that there's so much out there. But in general, I'm always, in terms of my mental health, I'm just always aware and monitoring. And, if I'm feeling something's off or I'm not doing as well, I make sure to get the tools and resources that I need to maintain, positive, healthy mental health.
I'm so grateful to hear you say that, but that it's sort of a management process. And in my head, I'm thinking, because I think and speak in metaphors, and I think I need to put things against each other to compare and contrast, because that's how I learn. But I'm almost thinking about this in the way of someone living with diabetes. They are constantly having to monitor their blood sugar. They're constantly having to make sure that they have enough to eat, or the juice, or the this, or the that, or the med. And I think sometimes when folks are monitoring their mental health, it's like, well, I feel better now, so I don't have to take those meds or go for that run or do those things that got me to this place in the first place. And we almost got to, and sometimes I'm a little guilty of that myself. And I've been a little bit better about it lately, maybe the past few months. And this is an ongoing thing. And we need to get over the bitch and moan stage and listen to people like you who are saying, hey, we got these productivity apps and we got this and we got that. And I've got a therapist who I can text, by the way, which is amazing, which is so cool. And another quick side note, folks, if you're out there and you think you've had a bad experience with therapy or it hasn't worked for you or what have you, there are good people out there like Miriam's therapist who will let you text them. Or, it's not a perfect process, but stick with it. So I guess I just want to say I'm glad to hear your process, because it helps my process, and maybe it'll help other folks' process out there. Now, this depression and everything you've been through, hospitalization, losing a friend, it's a hell of a journey. And because I know you a little more than I think some of our listeners, maybe I can answer this, but I'm really curious because you probably have a different answer than even what I can imagine. Folks would probably see this as a harrowing journey and maybe something that you want to avoid like the plague, and we do want to avoid pain and suffering, but how has this whole process made your life better, changed your life for the better?
Yes, so it's a great question. So I, for years, as I mentioned earlier, walked around feeling like I had this big secret and didn't want anyone to know, and was scared of anyone finding out. Worked in a law firm for many, many years and told no one. And I did a lot of traveling and all that kind of stuff and didn't tell anyone. And finally deciding to open up and start No Shame on You and sort of change my whole life and make meaning out of what I did, out of what I went through, not what I did, but what I went through, instead of keeping it such a secret, has really, I'm so honored that I went through all this and honored to be able to share it and touch people and help people and help get the message out there, exactly what you were talking about in terms of there is help out there. There are good people out there. Yes, I've had bad experiences with some therapists too. I went through many to find the right one. So like you were saying earlier, there are good people out there. There are good tools and resources and apps and tons of stuff out there now. And if I had to go through what I went through to now be able to be an advocate for all the great stuff that's out there and let people know that there is hope and you're not alone, and I get it, and so many other people get it. And Josh, you were talking about your experiences earlier. You get it. You've been there. So many people understand and get it. And I'm really happy to be able to now be someone who talks openly about my experiences and can share and hopefully make a difference in someone's life. So it's really been an amazing journey, and I honestly wouldn't change a thing. I mean, if someone told me 15 years ago I'd be having this conversation and be saying these things, I'd be like, what are you talking about? But truth be told, I wouldn't change a thing because I'm so happy to be able to be doing what I'm doing now and hopefully making a difference and advocating. And the other thing I wanted to echo that you said earlier, in my work with No Shame on You, you were mentioning how it's really now with mental health in the same way that with diabetes, you're constantly monitoring. Even if you're doing better and your blood sugar is stable and all that, you're still always monitoring and watching what you eat. It really is the same thing. I've had so many people say to me, I stopped going to a therapist. People who went through a crisis and reached out or wanted resources or whatever it is, and I spoke to them, and then 6 months later they called, they're back in a bad place, and I'm like, oh, were you going to the therapist you're still going to? Oh no, I stopped going because I was doing better. And and that's the thing that I think people often see. People often don't realize that it is something you always have to manage and monitor. And I'm so glad you brought that up because it's something I see so much, that people stop going, and in the same way you wouldn't stop seeing your doctor if you had diabetes, and you wouldn't stop taking your insulin if you needed to take it, and you would still be eating the way you're supposed to be eating. It's really the same thing with mental health. So I'm just glad you brought that up because it's something I see a lot, that people think, oh, I'm doing better, so I don't need to check things out anymore. And it's really something I'll for myself always have to manage, but I'm okay with that, because I know that that's just something I have to be on top of.
So true. And the quicker we get that into our heads that this is a lifelong thing, the easier it's going to get. We just need to be on it. We need to be on the ball with this, and instead of complaining and this and that. Which there's moments where I want to have a little mourning period and maybe a 10-minute pity party, and then okay, that's not helping me get what I want. That's not helping me get what I need. That's not helping me be good for me or for my wife or my kids or whomever, my colleagues. So we need to stay on the ball, if for nothing less, our own selves and our own personal happiness and our own personal wellness. And then kind of going back to what you were saying about the journey and what you've been through and not changing it. I mean, you are a professional life lemonade stand. You turn lemons into lemonade, and and maybe you have a little splash of vodka in there once in a while. That's cool. That's all right. It makes things a little interesting. But you really have, and using the experiences that you've been through to then help other people. I've said this before. I've said it on the show. I've said this in passing, and even to some of these places where I go and speak. And it's one of the most beautiful things a person can do for the rest of the human race is I've been through this, and maybe right now folks will consider me as less than, just as your friend back in the day did, but ultimately being able to share your experiences and connect. I mean, storytelling is so powerful, and having gone through something and then using it to help other people is also powerful, because when someone can relate to you and you're telling a story or you're telling about your experience in a way that benefits the other person, it makes that person's brain light up in a different way. And it's incredibly powerful. In that spirit, with who you are, what you do, with No Shame on You, I'd be curious to hear a little bit more about No Shame on You. because I know this is something you're working on. This is something you're passionate about. I have a little bit of a history on it, which is exciting. What are you all up to? What's the mission? What's maybe not so stuffy and buttoned down, but just give us what it's about, so we can kind of get to know you a little more, and then also what's going down in Chicago and what's going on with the organization.
Sure. So we achieve our mission, which is to eliminate the stigma associated with mental health conditions and raise awareness in the Jewish community and beyond. We achieve our mission in a number of ways. We have community outreach programs. Just last night, we collaborated with 2 other organizations on a pretty big event where we had 2 speakers and handed out a lot of resources, and we had over 300 people there. These 2 other organizations were amazing, and we really got a big crowd, so we were really thrilled with that event. And so we have community outreach programs like that. We also No Shame on You hosts mental health first aid classes. Our second one is coming up in July, where people, that just like there's CPR for physical health, there's mental health first aid for mental health, where people can learn how to respond to crisis, both mental health crisis and substance use disorder crises, and people can really learn a lot of tools and resources. It's an 8-hour course, so we're pleased to be able to offer that again for the second time this year. We have another one planned later this year. We're doing a documentary screening in a few weeks about an Israeli family who lost 2 sons to suicide tragically, and the response of their community to them, and really showing this film. And then we're going to have a Q&A with the director to try to normalize the conversation and talk about how the community responded and how we can, as a community, help people respond to these things and help people who are going through tough times and especially mental health conditions be there for them. A lot of people report that when they have a child or a family member with a mental health condition, people don't know what to do and they shy away from that. And that's something we're really trying to help combat and really normalize the conversation to help communities mobilize when people are going through a rough time for a mental health situation. We also are having a bullying prevention program for parents where we're going to talk about, the different skills, with teens and community building and all that kind of stuff, and help in monitoring your teen for bullying prevention and that kind of stuff. And we have our big event in November. We're going to have Brian Cuban, Mark Cuban's brother, talk about his mental health journey. He just came out with a book called The Addicted Lawyer, so we're excited. That's our big event this year. This will be our 3rd big annual event. We also hand out resources. We're marching in the Skokie 4th of July parade coming up, and we're going to hand out resources, try to get to as many people as possible to normalize the conversation and raise awareness. We're also going to be at some upcoming fairs and parades and festivals, and we also have a big online following where we share tools and resources daily.
Holy cow, do you sleep? That is incredible. I'm so impressed and so grateful, and you're doing, what I'm hearing is education, advocacy, and then there's a slight media element to what you're doing as well, which is super cool. And that's big for me, because I think in our field, obviously we both work in mental health, I think the marketing in our field sucks. And I say marketing because you need to market services to consumers. You need to market things. I mean, look at the way cancer was talked about 30, 35 years ago, 20 years ago, and how much it's talked about now, because folks are saying, oh, save the boobies and this and that, instead of you're going to die and this is bad. They changed things. It wasn't all gloom and doom, and I think we're slowly getting there. But I'm grateful for organizations like yours who are kind of making it a little more chill to talk about this. And I love that, because I'm not Jewish. I just play one on TV. No, that's a terrible joke. But I so appreciate that there are special populations and demographics. I know you serve everyone, but I work with Ephraim Epstein, who we mentioned previously, as an advisory board member for Elijah's Journey, which is a Jewish response to suicide prevention. And I think there's a little more Judaism as a religion rather than the ethnicity side, but I think we are a little bit of both. And on the religious side, it's big for me because I'm not religious, but my father was, and he died by suicide. His religious community kind of shunned him before he passed away because of his depression or undiagnosed depression. But regardless of even the religious side, I just appreciate that there's special demographics, because I speak to tens of thousands of people every year, but I'm not going to reach everybody. And the same thing goes with my other friends and colleagues who are in this field. But sometimes special demographics and populations, they only want to hear from that special demographic, their own people who look like them, sound like them, kind of with the veterans, sometimes that, veterans of armed services, sometimes they only want to hear from fellow vets. That's cool. Whatever gets you there. And so I so appreciate that there are we're slicing and dicing this up a little bit, and we're all kind of doing our part in a very specialized way. So kudos to you. That's mad cool. My thing, we're all just people. And we all are trying to figure out what to do before we leave this earth. Live, love, be happy, whatever that means. And sometimes that comes in, sometimes your head is covered with a yarmulke, and sometimes your head's covered with a baseball cap. Sometimes it doesn't matter. We're all people. I want to jump right into, this is a little more fun, because we've been so, not super serious, but, my other kind of pet peeve in mental health is that and suicide prevention too, is that, at least on a public scale, public level, while these are very serious topics and we should treat them with kid gloves, there's a little less humor than what I'm accustomed to, because I deal with things with humor. That's how I deal with life. And so this is like a little quick fire round. So this kind of has nothing to do with mental health. But I want people to I want people to see that you're more than no shame on you in mental health, and you got a sense of humor. This is kind of my inside the actor studio moment, my James Lipton, if you will. I can't quite pull off that voice right now, but
I'm so honored to even be like part of the same sentence. That's so cool. Okay.
So, in the spirit of James Lipton and inside the actor studio, Miriam, what is your favorite word?
Oh my God! I always watch that and think, what would people answer? And now I'm like, what would I answer?
On the spot.
Oh my gosh! I'm going to say love, which is cheesy, but I'm going to say love.
Oh, sweet. What is
I know,
your
cheesy, because I call my whatever. It's about my husband.
No, go ahead. You're fine.
No. Whatever. I don't know. It's cheesy. It's about my husband, and I love him, so I'm going to say love.
Aww.
I know, but that's really cheesy. Sorry for any listeners out there. I'm sorry for being.
Nerd. Oh man! All right. What is your least favorite word?
Oh my gosh! What's your least favorite word? Can I ask you?
What is my least favorite word? I would, you know what? If I was in the hot seat right now, I would I was thinking Philharmonic. Even though that's not my least favorite word, I probably would have spit it out because it's a weird name. It's a weird thing. I've gotten a lot of answers for moist.
Oh, that's funny. There's a video out now with like Matt LeBlanc, all these actors saying that word. Did you know that?
No, but I'm going to look it up.
Yeah, it's really funny. Okay. Let's go with hate, which is, I know it's easy again because I said love and now I'm saying hate, which is just cheesy.
Totally. It's good. It's good. We like cheesy here on this show. Big cheese fest. So who or what is your spirit animal?
That's interesting. So I have to say, this is going to sound weird, and I'm doing this literally, but my mother-in-law's, I was never into dogs growing up, and I know there's a lot of dog lovers out there, but my mother-in-law just got a new dog a couple years ago named Bandit, and I have never had such a connection with the dog. And I know I'm taking this literally, but he's like we're connected somehow. So I'm going to say Bandit.
That's cool. Go for it, Bandit. All right. Because it could be an animal. I mean, sometimes I feel like John Leguizamo is my spirit animal.
Right. I know I'm taking it literally, but I wanted to give a shout out to Bandit because he's my special, as my husband says, my special animal friend, and he's really he's very special to me. And it's the first dog I've ever really had such a connection with. So. Oh,
sweet. What kind of dog?
He's a mix, like part Rhodesian Ridgeback, part other stuff too. They're not quite.
I'm gonna have to look that up. That means nothing to me. I know like 3 kinds of dogs. One of them is my own. Cool. And the last one, let's go last one here. If heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say to you as you enter or as you get kicked out?
Oh, gosh. That's a good question. You did good. You made me proud.
Nice. I think that'll happen. I wouldn't be surprised. Put in a good word for you too. We'll see.
Oh, thanks.
We're not on speaking terms right now. I'm just kidding. We're good. So that's our quick fire round. I had fun. If folks want to get in touch with you through No Shame on You, or to learn more about what you got going on, how can they do that?
Sure. You can reach me at Miriam, Miriam, at noshameonyou.org, NOSHAMEONU.org, or to go to our website, just go to www.noshameonyou.org, and we have tons of resources and stuff there.
Awesome. So I will definitely put those in the show notes as well, in case you missed that. But that, my friends, is Miriam Ament, and I am so glad that we got a chance to do this, Miriam. This is a lot of fun.
You've been listening to the I'm Possible Project show with Joshua Rivedal and guest Miriam Ament. I love sharing stories and how to turn impossible into I'm possible. If you want more inspirational stories, our second and third books are in pre-order right now. Changing Minds, Breaking Stigma, Achieving the Impossible, as well as Lemonade Stand. Both contain powerful stories of overcoming tremendous odds. When life gives you lemons, squeeze, add sugar, and pick up a copy of The I'm Possible Project. www.IamPossibleProject.com/pre-order. Thank you so much for tuning in. You're more than a community. You're part of the I'm Possible family. Until next time, sending you lots of love.